Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Allison. I'm a knitter based in Nebraska, and this is my second knitting podcast. I hope you're doing well. I hope you are sitting down with your knitting with a nice drink. I have a vat of iced coffee, and I just want to talk a little bit about knitting today. So this morning, this is the morning by the way, I was supposed to have an early meeting that was like a time zone thing, got up extra early, got myself ready, and then of course by the time I'm like ready, logged on, ready to go with this meeting, it's canceled. But it actually worked out really well because it's early in the morning, I'm like wide awake, and it's actually nice and cool up here because I am up in the attic. It has been a heat wave lately. I know that it's hot everywhere across the US right now, but it's been like upper 90s, over 100 degrees most days, and the attic is like unbearable to be in. So luckily it's nice and early in the morning. It hasn't gotten hot here yet, so you can still enjoy my lovely yarn background while I talk a little bit about my knits. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what I'm wearing, which is my finished Cozy Classic Light. So this is a t-shirt, obviously, version of the Cozy Classic Light by Jessie Maed. I knit this in Purl Soho Cattail silk in the color Rose Madder. So I think I might have said in my last podcast when I showed this as a work in progress that I knit this in the size medium, but I actually just looked through my pattern and I had highlighted the small, so I knit a small for this version. So the last time that you saw this, it was a work in progress. I had just, I think, gotten like an inch or two into the body. So there's a couple things that happened as I was knitting the body. So the first thing is that I washed my gauge swatch in the wash because I checked on the Purl Soho website and it said that this yarn is machine washable. And I was like, I absolutely have to try that because that will make this like so much more wearable. Because when I had knit the gauge swatch originally, I did it traditional gauge swatch style, you know, like warm water, a little bit of soap, let it soak for a while, rinse it out, and then lay it flat to dry. And I noticed you could like maneuver it quite a bit. You could like stretch it out, you could pull it the other way, which is nice, but it took absolutely ages to dry. And that's just like one like thin one layer of gauge swatch, not like 2 layers of a lying flat sweater. And it took like 2 days to dry. It was crazy how long it took. So I was not like thrilled with the prospect of having a sweater that took days and days to dry, especially like a t-shirt that I want to be wearing when it's a little bit hot. Like if I get sweaty, I want to be able to clean it. So when I saw that it was machine washable, I just took that gauge swatch and I popped it in the load wash, took it out, like checked to see the whole thing. I didn't measure it, which I really wish that I had, compared like the original measurements to how it measured after the wash, but I did notice just like visually that it shrank upwards and that it went outwards. So like the knit stitches kind of pulled themselves apart a little bit, which just naturally shrinks it. And so because I noticed that it was going to go, you know, out a little bit and up a little bit, what I did was knit the body about 2 inches longer than I had wanted it to be, or like 2 inches longer than my minimum length, which is right at the waist of like my high-waisted jeans. So I knit the body to that length, got it where I wanted it, and then I had like very, very little yarn left to do the sleeves. And I knew that I wanted it to be short sleeves. I mean, it's literally like a half an inch. And what I did was knit one entire sleeve and then had to deal with the consequences of not quite having enough left for the second sleeve. And it was so close, I'm not even joking, like inches off. But if I had chosen a different cast off method, I would have easily done the whole thing, just one skein. But what I did was, I think Judy's super stretchy bind off. It's the bind off where you do a yarn over, bind off, yarn over, bind off. You're just adding a yarn over in between each stitch as you're binding off, and obviously that uses up quite a bit more yarn. So had I done like a traditional bind off, I wasn't going to do a invisible bind off because the pattern specifically says not to if you're using like silk or linen or any other non-wool yarn. So So I knit the one sleeve, I knit it so that the ribbing is like half the length of the ribbing for the neck and the body, because I knew I wouldn't get the full like 1 inch. And then I had a tiny little bit of yarn, I was like, it's barely gonna make it. I'm just barely gonna get this done. And I knit the whole thing, and I had, not even joking, like 20 stitches left to cast off, and I ran out of yarn. So had I chosen a different cast off method, I would have gotten through it, but I did have another skein of this yarn already because I wanted to knit either like a long sleeve shirt. Decided I don't know if I would like this fabric in a long sleeve shirt, but I also want to knit like a camisole. So I have that available, and I used, I don't know, a yard to finish casting off to make sure that all of the cast offs are the same. So from there, I didn't put it into the washing machine, but I washed it like pretty aggressively myself in like a big bowl. The hottest water, I used like plain Dawn dish soap. I wanted it to be like as aggressive as possible to like basically test it. And then I did throw it into the dryer. And in doing like a full-on, quite aggressive wash and dry, this yarn has softened up so much. So as you're knitting it, I didn't find it like uncomfortably stiff or like too dry. I didn't find it like unpleasant to work with, but it's definitely like, it doesn't feel like wool. It's not giving you a lot of ease. It's not like silky feeling for a silk yarn. It's definitely got like some toughness to it. And I was happy with that. Like, I was happy with how the shirt looked. I tried it on obviously before I washed it. I was really happy with how it looked then. But after washing it, it has like the most beautiful drape. I know it's kind of hard to see here, but I'll see if I can insert a video where the fabric just like moves so lovely. It's super soft. It's like really pleasant to the touch. It's so nice, and it's really light. I mean, this whole shirt is 100 grams and some change with the other skein. And I have basically been wearing this ever since. It is so comfortable. It's nice and light. It's loose. It's like the most pleasant summer yarn experience I have ever had. I'm just so excited about this Purl Soho Cattail silk, all about it. So like I said, I wrapped this up on Friday night. Today that I'm recording this, today is Wednesday. I wrapped this up on Friday night, and immediately the next day cast it right back on. Obviously in a different shade. And I'm not going to talk about this for ages and ages because you've just heard me talk about this for ages and ages. But I cast this on in the same yarn. It's Purl Soho Cattail Silk again, but this is the shade Cerulean Velvet, which felt very fancy. I love this shade. I think it's beautiful. Together, it's giving Wild Berry Pop-Tarts. It's giving that like paper cup in the 90s. I'm sure that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Whatever. I'm never gonna wear these on the same day, but I do find the color combination a little bit funny. But I'm just excited to have this again. But I am making a couple of changes to get a slightly different fit. So, as I said, this one I knit in a small. The next one I'm knitting in an extra small, and I'm also sizing down the needles. So like I said, as I expected, because of my swatch, as I washed it and put it through the dryer, it shrank upwards and it went outwards, which is totally fine. This still fits lovely. It hits exactly at like the waistline of a pair of jeans. It's a really beautiful fit, and I'm not like uncomfortable. It's not too tight or anything like that, but I was intending for this version to have like zero ease, maybe a tiny bit of positive ease, maybe a tiny bit of negative ease, but I wasn't looking for quite so much positive ease. So that's why I sized down both the needles and the size. I'm never in my life an extra small, so hopefully actually knitting this goes really quickly because it's a smaller amount of stitches, and I'm hoping that I can get it just a smidgen longer by making up that difference in smaller stitches, less stitches, fingers crossed, half an inch longer. So obviously I'm thrilled with this pattern, I'm thrilled with this yarn. The silk feels like very fancy. I feel like it doesn't look as fancy, but I'm like, ooh, that's silk. But it has me thinking about other summer yarns, And I'm wondering if there's something similar in a linen. So if you know, like, let me know in the comments, but like, is there a linen yarn that's thin, like fingering weight, even lace weight would probably do it, where as you're knitting it, it feels like a little bit tough, you feel like maybe it's going to be a little bit tight, but then after washing it, you're like, ooh, look at that drape. Because I love linen fabric. I am a linen girl. I will wear linen dresses, I have linen shirts, I'm all about linen, but I've never knit anything in linen because I always felt it would be like too thick, it would be too tough. Like the weave on a linen fabric is so fine, and I feel like a lot of linen yarns are a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, or they're mixed with like a lot of wool and stuff, which kind of, it's not linen at that point in my opinion. So if you know of 100% linen yarn that like does something similar, where as you wash it, it like softens up and loosens up a lot, please let me know. So like I said, I cast this on Saturday morning. I got through all of like the short rows and stuff. I'm basically ready to start like flying on the yoke. And then I thought to myself, I need to like take a break and do a rethink because my husband and I are going on vacation for the first time since 2019. I'm super excited. And we are going to Vancouver at the end of July. So we're going to Vancouver specifically because we have a wedding. It's Dave's cousin's wedding. They have postponed this so many times. I feel so bad because of the pandemic and everything. Obviously, international travel was really difficult for a long time and like irresponsible. And they were supposed to get married, I think in 2020. It's now 2022. They did get married, but this is like the celebration now. So we're finally going to Vancouver, this trip that we've planned for literally 2 years, and I never stopped to think of like, what is the weather like in Vancouver? And it's gonna be so much colder than I'm used to. So like I said, it has been like 100 degrees here this week. It's been in the upper 90s. I recently moved from Louisiana, where it's even hotter right now. I'm really used to summers being like hot, and I looked up what the average temperature is in like July and August because we're going at the end of July, and like the max highs are in the 70s, so like 30 degrees cooler than what I'm used to. And I was like, I'm gonna be cold wearing this. Like I'm going to be cold wearing my summer clothes. So obviously I'll pull out some of my warmer clothes that are under my bed so that I'm like appropriately dressed. But I was thinking, why don't I try to knit myself just like a little layer, something I can take on and off quite easily, so that when the mornings and the evenings are really cool, that I have something like cozy to wrap up in. So you might be thinking, well, Allison, why don't you just finish your half and half wrap and bring that? And that's a really good idea, but I basically just didn't think that I would have the gusto, like the chutzpah to finish it in time. That's a project that really I have to like make myself work on. I do find it, even though it's much easier to knit with wooden needles than it was in metal needles, it's still like a hefty project, right? And I did think that the size of it and the weight of it folded over double would probably be a little bit too heavy in what, could be 70-degree heat. So I cast on a completely different shawl. Essentially what I wanted was like a layering piece. So something that's just like a little bit warm, something that I could throw on and have it not look like you're wearing a winter scarf over a t-shirt. Have it be like nice and thin. So I immediately was like, fingering weight yarn. It has to be fingering weight yarn. I don't want to use DK weight or heavier. And I also wanted to make sure, or at least to choose yarns that like didn't require a mohair, didn't require a lace. I just wanted it to be quite simple so that I could knit it pretty quickly and so that it's nice and light and loose so it doesn't feel like a winter scarf. So here is what I decided to do. Let's see, oh boy, it's all tangled. Okay, so I have a pretty good start here on the Fleur Shawl by, I'm gonna try the French pronunciation, Espace Tricot. It is a free pattern. You can find it really easily. It's on Ravelry. It's also on their website. You don't have to use Ravelry. And this is a very simple triangle shawl. It is like standard, you know, 2 increases, or increase every row on the outside, increase every other row in the middle, and create a nice triangular shawl. So this pattern actually calls for DK weight yarn, and I just decided to knit it with fingering weight yarn. The yarns that I am using are, let me find, okay, so the brighter teal color is Mirasol Yarns Sulka Legato yarn. It is a blend of merino, alpaca, and silk. This is in the color teal, and then I'm also using Moondrake Fiber Company's Corriedale fingering weight yarn in Prada blue. And as I was searching for yarn to knit a shawl with, I basically was like, okay, A, needs to have enough yardage. So I had enough in this teal. Originally I had bought that yarn with the idea of knitting a vest, but I'm happy for it to be a shawl. I needed enough yardage, and I didn't want it to be white or anything like that, because we're going to a wedding. If I want to bring this to the wedding, I didn't want it to be like, look at her bridal shawl at this wedding. So I wanted it to be a color, and I really loved this color combination. I pulled out the teal because I knew that I had enough for that to be like a base color for pretty much any shawl. And I was like trying out different single skeins, especially in like my sock yarn, to see what would go with it. I pulled this out and I was like, ooh. So I'm really, really happy with this color combination. This, again, like these two colors, if you like blended them together, you get this color. Clearly I am having a like jewel tone moment. Maybe it's with like the 90s resurgence, but I'm really happy with these two colors together. This teal yarn I got at a local yarn shop here. I can't remember the name of the yarn shop, and I think honestly it might just be called The Yarn Shop, but here in Lincoln, Nebraska, it's a super cute shop. I will put the details in the description, but I pulled this, and then I pulled this single skein because I had 3 of this, 1 of this obviously, and I'm getting a little frustrated with myself because I keep buying single skeins of yarn. Like, I need to stop doing that. Not every yarn is a sock yarn, because you can get away with buying a sock yarn of just 1 skein. You can get a full pair of socks out of that. But like, this is not necessarily sock yarn. And what are you gonna do with 1 skein? Happily I can use it in this shawl, but like, come on. I need to start buying more than 1 skein. But I got this, I think, from their Wes Anderson collection, because I love Wes Anderson. I'm such a cliche, but I truly, Wes Anderson movies are a visual delight. His use of color is just stunning. So this, with a lot of what's in this basket, is from the Wes Anderson collection. I'm 99% sure. And I added that to cart so fast as soon as I saw it. The colors are beautiful. It's so even for an indie dye. Like, this is a more mass-produced yarn. This is an indie dye. I think the color is just phenomenal. So like I said, when I decided that like probably knitting another t-shirt is not going to be very useful if it's a lot colder than what I'm expecting, I cast this on Sunday. So this is only 3 days of work. I like might be turning into a shawl person. I'm knitting this, like I said, the pattern calls for DK weight yarn. I'm using fingering weight yarn. I only sized down 1 needle because I wanted it to be a little bit loose, a little bit airy, and I'm not too fussed about the size. Like, if it turns out a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, it's a shawl. I don't really care. But in that like 3 days, I've already knit, I think it's half of the rows. Obviously, each row gets longer and longer and longer, so it's going to take me a lot more time to do the second half than it did the first half, but I'm really happy with how it looks so far with everything besides the baubles. I don't know, can you even tell? You can barely tell that there are baubles on this. The pattern gives instructions for like a 5-stitch bobble and a 3-stitch bobble. I did a 3-stitch bobble and they're like disappearing into the ether. They are shrinking back into the fabric like that Homer Simpson gif where he shrinks into the bush. It's not a great look. So I need to look up, the next stripe that I do is going to be another bobble stripe. I need to like figure out a better plan for my bobbles before I get there. So if you have any recommendations for like a bobble that really pops out, like they pop out so beautifully on the pattern pictures, please let me know, because these are really sad and like you might as well not even have them there. They almost look like a mistake. So what I might end up doing is when I'm done with this, taking that blue yarn and weaving it through and like literally sewing it around the bobbles to force them to pop out. I might do that after blocking to make sure that the thread is not too tight, but we'll see. Either way, this has been super quick to knit so far. Generally, I would not say that I enjoy knitting flat, but I have been enjoying knitting on this. I think because this yarn, the alpaca silk and wool blend, is super soft. It's really lovely on the hands. It's like, if it's going to be against the neck, it's not a problem. It's really lovely to knit with, and having like fingering weight but with like a slightly larger needle, it's just going so quickly. So this has been a really satisfying project to work on. The stripes really keep you motivated to keep going to the next section. I'm really happy with this color palette. I think that it's going to work well outside of this trip too, right? So it's going to be nice. It's a little layering piece. I can throw it in my bag. I can wear it if I need it. It'll be nice in the airport too, just to have like something snuggly, but it's nice. But it's a nice color for like, it's bright enough to be like summery, right? Like it's bright enough to wear in the summer and have that not look like a winter scarf, but it's also not like so bright that I can't wear it in winter. So that is it for everything that I've been working on lately, but I did want to show you a work in progress that has been languishing in a bag for the last couple of months, but it's beautiful and I wanted to talk about it. This is going to be the Big Love cardigan. Oh, I forgot who wrote this pattern, but I will include the name right here and I'll include it in the description. But this, it's so dreamy. I cannot wait to finish this and be able to wear it. It's super heavy. It's not super heavy. It is super woolly, and it is very much like a rusticy fall winter knit. And I was starting this project in March when it was still like cool enough to work on it, and then as it's gotten to be 100 degrees, I stopped working on it because I am knitting this in Istek Swoop. I am knitting this in Plutolopi, and this is the color Wine Red. I'm thrilled with this color. I think it's so beautiful. And I'm knitting this with just one strand of Plutolopi. I think the pattern calls for this weight to be held double or to use, Letlopi. However, I wanted it to be a little bit thinner, so I'm just knitting it thinner. This cardigan has been in my things that I want to knit list for quite a while, and I really wanted to knit it in some of my Nutidin yarn that I have, but I also kind of wanted to test it first because it's a little bit of a more challenging pattern. It is very much like a trust the process kind of pattern. The whole beginning of it, like basically the entire yoke and like neckline, it looks ridiculous. I was posting about it in my Instagram stories way back in March when I was doing it. I will see if I can find some of those pictures or videos because it looks ridiculous until you get to this point. So I have separated it for the sleeves. I've knit like 1.5 inches on the body, and then I had to put it away because it was just too heavy and woolly to work on when you're feeling hot. But I'm really looking forward to working on this again. I just like pulled it out the other day to reminisce, I guess, and remembered like how delicious it is. So because I'm knitting this in a lighter weight yarn, I'm using the same needles because I liked how that swatch turned out, but it is going to end up being a little bit smaller. I believe, I'll put what size I'm knitting here, but I've tried it on. I think that the fit is going to be perfect, and I'm so looking forward to being able to wear this. I think it's going to be one of those like lifelong cardigans. The texture of like the body of this cardigan is not like a waffle stitch, but it has knits and purls to it, so it's going to be like quite insulating, and I think I'm going to get so much wear out of it. I was a little bit worried or nervous to start working on this because everyone talks about like any kind of unplied roving style yarn being really, really difficult to knit with, and I haven't found that at all. I've literally only accidentally broken the yarn once. It's very easy to put back together, but for the most part I found it no different than working with any other yarn. But I think part of the reason why I'm finding it really easy to work with is that when I'm knitting, I keep my fingers super close to the needles. I actually found on my phone, I took like a video of me knitting with this yarn, and you can see like my fingers are not like way out here for tensioning the yarn. I keep my fingers really close, and I think that just helps because the longer or the farther you are away, there's that much more chance of you pulling the yarn like fully out from itself, right? Because this yarn breaks so easily. If you have your finger like quite far away, if you're tensioning your yarn quite far away, I think the odds of you breaking that yarn are really high. But because I keep my fingers really close to the needles, I just find that more comfortable. I think it's like more ergonomic, honestly, and the fibers just don't have that space to break, so I'm able to knit with it quite easily. This beautiful project is going to stay in timeout basically until the weather starts cooling off a little bit. It's just like too woolly to work with for the time being. However, I like just wanted to remember how much I love this project. I think it's so beautiful. I cannot wait to wear it. This is the kind of pattern too where I feel like once I finish it, I'll like decide for sure, but I feel like me and my husband could like share it. Not necessarily this version, but I have, if you can barely see it just there, a very dark gray Newton yarn. So I think if I knit this in a slightly larger size using that yarn, that we might both be able to wear it, which I think would be really cute because I love that kind of stuff. And I don't think that it's too feminine for a man to wear. I have looked through the pattern pages, like of pattern examples on Ravelry, and there are other men who have like worn this sweater. So I do think that it could work as like a unisex pattern. I think it's beautiful. It's much more of a thinker than like anything that I've been working on lately, and I kind of miss that. I've been working on a lot of like very simple stockinette projects, and like bringing this out, I was like, ooh, remember what that was like? Remember like picking up all those stitches? It was a lot of fun to work through the yoke of this. It's a little bit less fun to be like knitting the body flat because that's going to go on for absolutely ages, but it is a really beautiful pattern. All right, that is all I have of my own knitting content, but I wanted to do like a little bit of a knitty chat at the end of this. I'm not going to be knitting during it because I will just be looking down and I won't be able to look at the camera, but I wanted to talk about a couple other summer patterns that I'm considering knitting this summer before I start really wanting to work on like fall winter projects. There's one or two more patterns that I'm like, ooh, I really want to work on that. So first one is the Rib Lace Raglan by James Watts. It's just like a really beautiful, lacy, but not like super feminine, not like a florally looking lace, you know what I mean? It's like they're like lacy stripes, and I just think it looks so cool. I think it could look really cool with full long sleeves, so maybe it's more of like an autumn knit for me. But I have been looking at the project pages for this, and I think it looks so cool. So I'm super interested in maybe knitting that. If you've knit it or want to knit it, let me know. I'm just like stalking everybody's pictures of this pattern because I think it looks so good. And the other sweater that I've been considering knitting is the Cottage Core Crop by Kate Garden? Let me look at her name real quick because I know I have that. Okay, Cottagecore Crop by Kate Garden. And this is not like a new release. I think it might have even come out last summer, but it's like a button front peplum top, and I think it's so cute. It's very much my style. Theoretically, I could knit it with this yarn. Might be a DK weight. But the style of the Cottagecore Crop is very much my style. It's like super feminine. I think it looks really beautiful in like speckly yarns. A lot of people knit it in like indie dyed yarn, and I think it looks so good. So that is also on my knit list. Please, like I said, if you have knit it before, let me know because I want to see everyone's version of it. I think it's so cute. I love like a ruffle. I love a little floral. I've actually been doing not a lot of sewing lately, but I've been doing some sewing lately. I've sewn 2 like nap dresses, you know, Hill House Home, their nap dress style. It's very easy to make. If you literally just Google like nap dress free pattern, the first thing that comes up is exactly what I used, and I used the same size, the same dimensions that they used. It's really, really easy to make, and I think it's so cute. It has like the little fluttery ruffle sleeves, and you get to pick what fabric it's in. I've been like so tempted by the nap dress for like ages, and there's literally only one pattern that they've ever had that I've actually been tempted to wear. Otherwise they're just like a little bit too light, a little bit too floral, a little bit, I don't know, like English cottage. Like that's the vibe I always get from nap dresses, and that's not quite the look for me. So I have one that I sewed in like a yellow and white check like gingham, and another one that I sewed in a really beautiful like slight, like very, very slight subtle floral printed chambray. Super into that. They're really comfortable to wear. You don't need to wear a bra because it's like all elasticated up in the boob area, and it's very, very comfortable. I'm so stoked about those. So I have been doing a little bit of sewing, a little summer sewing. Let me know if you ever want to see any sewing content. I might do a video like before we leave on this trip because I'm just so excited. We haven't gone on vacation in a really long time. I might show like what are the hand knits that I'm bringing on vacation. We shall see. Speaking of vacation, if you are in Vancouver, if you've ever been to Vancouver, there's like a million yarn shops. I was just looking the other day to see what's all there. I knew that Sweet Georgia was there, but there are a ton of other yarn shops. So if you have any recommendations, even outside of yarn, like me and my husband are quite into food. We're big foodies. We like to go to breweries. So if you have any recommendations for Vancouver, please let me know. I'm really looking forward to this trip. What I like to do for vacation planning is to basically create this whole long list of options, right? So that if we're like walking about throughout the day, I have them on pins on Google Maps so that if we're like walking around and we're like, ooh, you know what, I could really go for a coffee right now, that we can just open Google Maps and see like, oh, I already chose this place, it's over here. So if you have any pins to add to my Vancouver trip, please let me know. I'm so excited to go. But that is it. That is everything that I wanted to talk about today. Please, like I said, let me know what you're working on in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.